Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 45, I believe, Ben. And we are going to be chatting about hot tents, setups, what's involved in it, all that good stuff. Now, Ben, you're a little more experienced than me on this. I've only ever had the opportunity to try one hot tent setup, and it was the old-fashioned big canvas type. And it pretty much had one of those stoves in it like we were talking about a few minutes ago from Princess Auto. So that gives you the idea on what I'm experienced with. But I know yourself, you and a few other guys there on the Bushcraft community, Jeremy and Gary and maybe a few other people, you guys have gone out a couple times this year alone and set up hot tents with stoves that you guys made yourselves, right?
Yes. Well, we've had a combination of a few things. The trip that me and Gary and Jeremy all did together, Gary had the G stove. Jeremy had the Princess Auto stove, and I had the ammo can stove that I made myself, and I'm still modifying and building, in fact. And in a lot of ways, I found that they seem to be fairly comparable. So that was kind of interesting. But there's definitely conveniences and luxuries and weight savings as you pay more money. But yeah, hot tents. Before we get really into the stove, that's definitely a part of it, but the tent itself, and I really want to hear a bit more about the canvas, and I think you're really kind of interested in about these I guess we'll say one tiger style pyramid.
Yeah,
although you can get essentially the same thing through AliExpress and a few other brands, where although a couple of features are a little different, they're all very essentially similar. The convenience and the nicety of it is these tents are very much lightweight, and packable, and portable, and I think that's the real selling point to them. None of them come with a stove jack, but One Tigress now, I believe relatively recently, has started selling one, I think for $20 to $30. I'm not sure the exact amount, but I've also found that you can make one for probably much less than $10 by going down to the dollar store if you know what you're looking for. So, yeah. So the canvas one you had, I'm assuming you got to use was probably relatively heavy. And
it was incredibly heavy. So the thing about the canvas one, and you kind of hit all the major points on why it's not great, is it's very heavy. You almost need, like the one I was in was fairly big. It was like 8 by 10 or something like that. Like there was 3-4 of us in it. It was heavy. It took multiple people to set up. But other than that, I mean, those are the two big drawbacks I can think of. The good things about the canvas tent is the stove jack comes sewn into it. Now, I'm assuming that was added in after the fact, same as you would with any other tent, to be honest with you. So I don't see a big advantage there. But they're a little bit more durable because the canvas itself is just a more durable material. It can take a little bit more abuse. You can throw it around a little bit more. Brush hitting it's not going to matter. Crush weight from snow. You can actually get a little bit heavier loads on them. But I still wouldn't want to push it too much because it's only going to be as good as the poles that are used inside it. And when I used mine, when I went and was able to use the one I was in, they had some pre-set up poles with it. But I've also seen some of the canvas ones where people have just cut them wooden poles when they've gone out, and even smaller canvas tents, again, much like the teepee style, where it just kind of had the one pole in the middle. And I'd be curious to see how they hold up too, because I did like the durability of the canvas, all joking aside. The weight sucked, though. I mean, we're talking at least 20, 30 times heavier, like bare minimum. And for the same size of tent. Now, the tent I had was even bigger, so it was even heavier again. I think it was like 80 pounds when it was all said and done. Like, we hauled it in on a four-wheeler.
Yeah, see, and I believe, and I have to double check this, but I believe the one I have there is like 2-3 pounds. It's 2.6, I think, is the number on it. If you want the screen, it's probably another pound and a half or so on top of that. But then you can't have the stove in it. And it packed down relatively small, and I can take the pole out and just cut a stick in the woods, and I can get the weight down a tiny bit more. I mean, there's not a ton to it. As for weight, when me and Jeremy and Gary went, we experienced, similar as we've gotten today, give or take about a foot of snow where we were. And it may have even been a heavier snow. And I say that because I was out shoveling today, and this stuff is light and fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm to, we got 13 inches. Gary had one of those ice fishing tents, something you would assume is designed to be used in the winter, designed to have snow hit it and stuff. Now, they are like cubes. They're very square, very flat, and the top is fairly flat. The pyramid one has the pyramid shape. We found that they shed snow very well, so we didn't get a lot of accumulation on top. It all came and just sort of slid down to the sides. And really, other than pushing the sides in a tiny bit, like in the morning, we all got up and shoveled it all out about 6 inches away from the outside of the stove.
From the outside of the tent, not the stove, right? It didn't go in that far.
No, yeah.
Okay.
From outside of the tent wall. So by doing that, we still had a little bit of an airflow, but we kind of had a bit of a wall that kind of protected us from the wind and stuff because it built up. And we all stayed really comfortable in these things. And we will be going live shortly.
Uh-oh. Nope, that's me. Don't worry about that.
So ours were very lightweight. I gotta say they held up in the snow like a champ. Jeremy does an awesome review video on his, and he literally says that it's got I think he said the Lone Wolf 902 seal of approval. They all three that we had there. We had 2 smoky huts and an iron side, and they took the snow extremely well, and no real issues. And honestly, that around here in a lot of places, a foot of snow overnight is a fair bit. You're not going to see that a ton. So I would say that, yes, they handle the snow very well. Canvas, like you said, weighs quite a bit. And in both cases, you could cut poles yourself. I don't know if anyone follows the Newfoundland Explorer, Justin Barber. He does a couple of videos where he has a big canvas one, and it is, I think he cut some spruce poles and stuck one up. So yeah, it can be done, but that's still work and time. It's hard to beat how quick these One Tigris ones were to set up. It's literally peg out the sides, put the center pole in, and then tighten everything up. And I don't think it takes more than 10-15 minutes to set one up on a bad day.
Yeah, that canvas one we had, I think between all of us, we were at it like an hour.
Yeah.
So, and that's more than one person hitting it up. Now, a question that's probably on everybody's mind is, was it actually warm, the ones you were running? Because the canvas one, I mean, once again, it's a little thicker. I assume it'll tend to hold the heat in a tiny bit better. It's still going to get cold fast if the fire goes out, but I just assume it would reflect more heat in, just being a thicker material. So how did you guys fare out? Did it keep enough heat in for you guys to be warm, or was it just kind of breaking the chill off?
It definitely makes a huge difference. When the stove goes out, yes, it cools down quick. But hopefully, if you get to that point, you're already into your sleep system. Your sleep system should be designed to handle it. I mean, I had my down sleeping bag. My daughter was with me. She had another upper end Tenton type sleeping bag I had. I gave her a good liner, and we had a few other things to boost it, like the hand warmer trick. But as long as the stove was running, there was quite a bit of heat, because they're not spacious, as in they don't have anything really in the way of a vertical wall. They just go straight down to the ground from the pole. So it is a pyramid in that way. So as you get closer and closer to the edge, you have less and less headroom. And I think a lot of the canvas ones have like a wall section.
Mm-hmm.
So that means your square footage is more usable. With these pyramid style ones, I think mine is, the Wild Haven is 8.5 by 8.5 is the you're flicking around.
Yeah, I flipped around because now people can read the shirt. I'm still listening to you, but now the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventure shirt is legible by everybody else watching. Backwards for you, though, I think.
Actually, it's right for me.
Okay, we're cool.
So, yeah, what we were saying is that the canvas ones would have a slight wall, knee wall, or higher, and that would give you a better square footage. Because my Wildhaven is only a small bit off from the size of the tent you described. For a footprint, like 8.5 by 8.5 versus 8 by 10, you're still talking roughly a similar square footage.
It's a good amount of floor space, but those ones that you guys had, they, like you said, they're the kind of the teepee style, as where the one I went out in was more like kind of a cross between a baby barn and a circus tent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And that makes a huge difference in what's usable space inside. And the Wildhaven, being more square, has a little bit more floor space than, say, the Smoky Hut or the Ironside, but only a tiny bit. The corners kind of come out a bit more, but still, as you get close to that edge, you really can't use a lot of it. You can park your backpack and stuff down there. I did put some small things down into that corner to open up the rest of the floor space. And in the review video I did, I mean, like I said, it is a fair bit of room. I could probably get 3 or 4 people, like adults, in there in the summer if I had to. It'd be a little close. So it is a reasonable amount of room. It's a lot for 2 people. And these have the advantage they're a year-round thing. A canvas tent you'd probably use either as, like you say, a base camp or a winter trip where you're going to bulk it in. You're not going to carry it on your back for very long.
Yeah, no, not at all. In the instance that we went out, we were hunting. In all honesty, like I said, we went out. We took the tent, stove. We were all on bikes. We had like foldable cots. We were set up very comfortably, comparatively to, say, when you guys were going out, where you basically were doing the tenting thing with a stove. We were kind of doing like the base camp cabining thing with a very lightweight cabin, I guess is the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, and exactly. They're 2 different beasts that share a similar function, that you have a wood stove to add heat to it. I really like this lighter weight, more portable item, because it's something that I'm going to be able to take in spots that I wouldn't potentially take a bigger one. It's something I can lug around easier. And it is all in what you're doing and what you need. I'm not knocking the bigger one. I think, especially for like a base camp idea. No,
it served its purpose. Like I said, it was good. Where there was multiple office, we had the availability to be able to carry it in on the bikes. And like I said, everybody kind of took something. It was awesome for what it was. Now, if it was just me going out hunting by myself, even if I had the ATV, it'd still be impractical, because by the time I put that on it, even if I scrapped the cot and just went with a sleeping pad and stuff like that, I'd probably still have a little too much to manage, and I doubt I'd be able to set that tent up on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure if you had to, you would.
Yeah, I mean, I could. I imagine I would find a way. It just wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be convenient. Let's go with that.
And like you said, with the bike, with that and all the other gear you're taking, now you're potentially looking at like a trailer or some kind of way to extend what you can carry and load. This adds to the difficulty. So, yeah, we've covered a lot here in the differences of canvas and like nylon ones. So you mentioned that on your canvas one, the stove jack was permanently sewn in.
Yeah. So, and once again, it wasn't my tent, but the way this stove jack came out was on your gable ends. One end had a vent that you could open up to allow airflow in and out, and then on the other gable end, you come down a couple feet. Because this thing was relatively high. Yeah. I think it was 8 feet high in the center or something like that. Maybe even a little higher. I can't remember. Like, it was a pretty good-sized tent. It was like a baby barn.
Yeah.
But anyway, you come down the gable end on the other side, and then the jack was like there was a fiberglass panel that looked like it was stitched into the material, and it had
Yeah.
the jack hole right through there. And
Yeah.
it, like I said, it was kind of a permanent asphyxiation to the tent. So I don't know if the owner of that tent cut the hole out, brought it in, and had it sewn in, or if that's how that tent came when he purchased it. I assume that's how it was when he purchased it, but I don't know that for sure.
A lot of them appear to be, especially the research I've done, and I don't have tons of experience. A lot of them do appear to be Velcro now, or some I've seen seem to have some snaps added on. So they do appear to be something that's removable for various reasons. Probably oftentimes even just for setup, getting everything in and lined up. But I'm sure in some cases they're much more permanent too. And I see an advantage to both. But it's very important to keep that hot chimney away from the main material. And it's probably fairly nice to know that it's something that's easily replaceable if it does get damaged or overheated or issues. So personally, I think I would look for one that is removable in some way, shape, or form, because you never know what could happen.
No, and that's fair enough. And I guess that's a second question I would have about the nylon ones. Now, the canvas ones are inherently a little bit more resistant to heat just in general, like for stray embers that may come out of the pipe if you don't have a spark arrestor or something like that. How did your guys' nylon ones hold up to stuff like that? And is like stray sparks going up through the pipe posing a risk in those, or can it be mediated?
They definitely did pose a level of risk. So the one I stayed in, the first night we had absolutely no issue. The second night, I was sitting there. It was a calm night. It was a beautiful night, and I'm looking up through, and it was a white tent, and I'm looking up through, and you could literally see the odd, and I call them flankers, but the odd spark or flanker coming out of the top of the chimney and blowing away, and those were fine. But all of a sudden, I seen one, and it just went up, and it did a lazy spin, and it came down, and I could see it aiming right at the tent. And I'm like leaped up, and I'm flicking the side of the tent, trying to make sure it doesn't stick on or hit it. And where the tent was fairly cool and dry night, it hit, and it's a ripstop material, so it basically took out one of those ripstop holes. Now, I'm not saying that water couldn't leak through that. But I don't think you would get a lot of water leaking through it. It's still a small enough hole that like the water tension itself is going to keep a lot of it out. But there are materials you can buy. They're not all that expensive. Tenacious tape is the one I'm somewhat familiar with, and you can buy that at Atmosphere, Mech, Amazon. And it's a tape that's not supposed to peel or anything. You can just put on and repair ripstop style material, sil nylon, all that. So that is an option. But yes, you do have to be somewhat careful. You would like ideally a spark arrestor. You do want to make sure your chimney is significantly higher than your tent itself. I think the recommended heights I've seen were between 18 inches and 2 feet.
Over the top of your tent?
Over the highest point of the tent, yeah.
So that is kind of a little advantage to the canvas ones, because it was kind of more like an iron skin material. Sparks were hitting it, and they were just going out, never even hurt the tent. Like, I mean, that material there, you could almost hold a lighter on, and it would brown it. I mean, not indefinitely, but you could like hold it there for a second. It wouldn't really melt or hurt anything, in all honesty. Yeah,
canvas is inherently more flame resistant than nylon, no doubt about it. And therefore, there is the need to be somewhat careful and good maintenance. If it's slightly damp outside, that dampness on the tent would probably offer some degree of protection, would probably put out that ember before it actually created damage. But like I said, on a nice, cool, dry night, it's more susceptible. And depending on the type of wood you're burning, you're going to get more flankers or less. There's a lot involved in there, and different stoves have better ability to sort of contain those issues. And that's what I guess brings you to the next thing. Stoves. A lot of options out there, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were chatting about just before we started up the podcast and why we ended up being a couple minutes late. I just happened to notice it doesn't look like we have anybody listening to us tonight. I assume the storm must be keeping them at bay, so we have, I guess, just you and me. But in any case, yeah. So the one that we had in the canvas tent it was obviously some sort of bot model, very similar to the ones that come from Princess Auto. It wasn't exactly like that, but it was some sort of firebox stove that had to be hauled in. And I think it actually took a 6-inch pipe. Like, it was a fairly good sized pipe in this thing too. And you could fill this stove and it stayed warm all night. Now I don't want to say a drawback, but it's something you have to be aware of. In the smaller tent, and I say smaller loosely, smaller overall, height and everything included, smaller overall, smaller stove. So you don't plan on keeping that going. Oh, okay, Emily is here. Sorry, it didn't show up on when you joined in. So yeah, you have to be more conscious about filling that. How often did you end up filling your stove, Ben? I know it was somewhat frequent, but wasn't horrible.
I think it was about every hour and a half to 2 hours for sure. We had to fill it up, and that would be almost out. By that point, there would be a few embers, just enough to kind of get it going. I had to keep a lot of small stuff in, and then some slightly bigger stuff, and I'd build it up. I usually spent about 15 or 20 minutes getting it built up and going good again, and then I'd stagger full and just close it down, and then about an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I'd wake up. But honestly, like, every time I seemed to wake up that night, I heard Gary and Jeremy out there doing almost the exact same thing. So I had the smallest of the three stoves. I had the ammo can stove. Jeremy had probably the biggest with the Princess Auto stove. In comparison, and I can't tell you for sure what the G stove was, but I weighed mine the other day. Chimney, I think I said, was around 7 pounds. The stove itself was 9 and a bit, so 15, 16 pounds easy for my total stove weight. Princess Auto advertises their stove at 27 pounds. And it weighs every bit of that for sure. So that stove is twice the weight. And it has a lot of nice things about it. It has 2 racks that come out that you can sort of hang things on to dry or cook things on, or hold pots, warming racks. It has these 2 tubes that kind of like radiate heat and allow for an airflow. I think it has vents in the front and back. It does have a lot of features, and with that bigger body, you can put a fair bit of wood in there. And I know that Jeremy got inside of his tent quite warm with that particular model. So he was bragging quite a bit about how nice and toasty it was inside his stove.
And that's much like what we had in the canvas one. Like I said, we were filling ours about every 4 hours, so significantly bigger stove. But a lot of weight. You know what I mean? Like I said, the whole tent setup was like 80 pounds, 80, 90 pounds. Just for the tent and stove kind of deal. So, I mean, it was a lot of weight. That's a giant drawback if you don't have the means to transport it. But the good thing about a stove like that,
I think it's $68.99 or something right now. Now, there's none available in Halifax or Moncton, so if anyone wants one, unless they got them in the last 24 hours, there are none here. You can sign up for them to let you know when they come in, and you can order them online. But that is, I've looked over the last couple of weeks, and that is about the cheapest stove you can get that's considered packable with the chimney. There's some cheaper $30 ones, but they usually, I think they're more of a radiant heat design that you put a gas stove underneath. And by that, I mean like your camping style stove.
Yeah, I can't even find them on the Princess Auto website right now.
No, is it gone?
Yeah, I'm just searching stove, and I don't got.
What?
No wood stoves coming up at all. Just some. Oh, wait. I think I found it. I'm also on the French site, so I have to try and convert everything in my head, which is always fun. 6888.
Yeah.
Now, let's see. I might be able to do this. Studio mode. Nope. So we're not even going to bother trying with that. But yeah, it's a good stove for a cheap price, and it's wicked hard to try and even make a stove for under that price.
Well, like I said, I built my chimney. I said to you, I didn't say it on this podcast, but I made my chimney. I went down to Canadian Tire and I bought stovepipe or not to, exhaust extenders. I think they're all 18-inch exhaust extenders. I bought them at $9.99 a piece. I bought 4. I cut one to make the flange on my stove, welded it in place, and then I bought a 5th piece that's a 20 degree offset to sort of give me some clearance in some situations. All that means I spent approximately $50 on the chimney alone for my stove. So when you think about that, that Princess Auto one's a pretty good deal, because I spent that on chimney alone pretty close, like just off of that price. You can't buy an ammo can now for much less than $20. It's probably closer to 30 anywhere. Then if you buy chimney pieces, you still have to build it or you still have to assemble it. There are online kits, we talked about this, me and you earlier, that you can buy. I think they're close to $100, which all of a sudden doesn't make it a very economical stove. But it is going to be potentially half the weight of your Princess Auto stove.
And that's really what you're paying for, is convenience. I mean, that's the way it always goes, is the more money you spend, the more convenience you gain out of it, in all honesty.
Yes, and this is where you can get to the next model. Like Gary's stove, the G stove, it has really nice, rounded, smooth warming racks. It's very compact. Everything fits in it really nice. It weighs probably about the same as mine, or just a few pounds off. But it's a bigger stove. He has a glass door on his. I mean, the G stove is a very nice stove, and it works very well. And it comes with a lot of options. Like you can buy, I think you can even buy an oven for it. So there's different chimney options. There's the damper you can get for it. There's quite a bit of stuff you can do. Different spark arresters. But you're going to pay for that. It's still, I think that stove's a few $100.
I was finally able to get this flipped over. Just keep on going there. But if anybody was interested, this is the stove we were talking about from Princess Auto. So as you can see, it's a nice little stove with some extra features in there. There's the tubes that Ben was talking about, the drying racks, and this does come with the pipe, correct?
Yeah, the pipe comes with it. There's a little spark arrestor on top with the chimney, the little cap to prevent snow and stuff from going down the thing. So, you know, it's not a bad stove. I can't knock it. It's got those nice long legs, which I believe you can shorten. And there's quite a few people that have done some modifications to it to improve it. So you really can't knock that. Do you want to just see if you can look up the G stove?
G stove?
G stove, yeah.
Let's see. Yep, so G Stove has its own website, gstove.com.
Yeah, and there's a local company that's a reseller of them. But
here, I'll just fire over this. Just because it's their website, I will be able to... we should be able to get a little bit more.
Yeah.
So this is the stove here you're kind of talking about on the right, eh? And these are the different options kind of along the bottom.
The cheapest one on their site, there's actually a hollow section in the back that they refer to as a bit of an oven. Yeah, your mouse is just on it there. So you can actually you could probably cook a muffin or bannock or something within that little hollow
space. So back
space.
here.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if Gary's had that. I think his was more solid, so you get bigger pieces of wood into it. But yeah, very nice. Does it give the weight? That's what I'd really like.
Let's take a look. Let us go on a magical adventure together. So what do we have? We have the door opening height is 15.5 centimeters, width is 12.5. Test size. So 9,900 grams, or 9.9 kilograms. Does that sound about right to you, Ben?
What would you say? 9.9 kilograms?
Yeah, that would be my guess. It's 9,900 grams.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's 10 kilograms. So, 18 pounds, give or take.
Thereabouts.
Yeah. So, yes, lighter than the Princess Auto stove. A little bit heavier than my ammo can stove. Also bigger than my ammo can stove. So I think it's a good trade-off there. But it was what, 2-something American?
219 American for the one we were just looking at, and that was the cheaper of the bunch.
Yeah.
The other two models is 327 and 418.
So you're looking at Canadian, well over $300 for any of them. So they're not cheap. And then you can get even lighter. I was looking up a titanium one. There is one out.
So just while we're on G-Stove, before we go away from that, gstove-canada.com. They do have a Canadian shop as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
Site's a little slower to load, but it looks like they have all the same stuff on there. So their cheapest one looks like it comes in at about... they actually have... Oh, nope, that's a pipe oven. I must stand corrected on that. So the cheapest stove, per se, is $330.
Yeah. So, ballpark similar price. You can buy a titanium one from a Canadian company. The prices may still be American. And it weighed about 2 pounds, 6 ounces. So there are a lot of options out there. You're looking that up, or?
Yeah, I was just kind of quickly finding it, but I don't know which one's going to be the best one to go with.
LITE.
Light Outdoors?
Yes.
That's the one I happen to have open. So, as you can see... Oh, wrong one again. Yeah. There we go. So there's... that's 180 to 390 US. This is an American site, but that's the stove there kind of deal.
Yeah. So if you actually go on in and read about it, the guy is, I believe, from Alberta. And when I was doing my research on this one, there's a 12-inch and an 18-inch stove. You can buy it with or without a baffle. And you can buy the combo kit, so you can get the 12-inch and the 18-inch together, which is basically a 12-inch body and an 18-inch body, a 12-inch baffle and an 18-inch baffle are the two differences. And you can look up here. You have the sizes up here. They weigh next to nothing, even with the 8-foot chimney. I think it's still like less than 3 pounds. For
2 pounds 8 ounces with the 18-inch stove, or 2 pounds 6 ounces for the 12-inch stove. So very, very similar in weights all the way around.
Yeah. So that's about as light as you can get, and it's really not a lot more expensive than, say, the G stove. But the difference is this is a titanium stove made of a very thin foil, for lack of a better word. So very thin, very flexible piece of titanium, and they're somewhat prone, apparently, to denting and buckling. If you're
Well, to be that light, less than 3 pounds, that size, I mean, that material's going to be ultra thin. So I can see the denting, but as long as you didn't puncture it, would it really be a problem? I mean, providing it wasn't a giant dent or something.
So I did reach out to a local guy, who has one, or had one. He sold it. And he said that he did dent his. There was a crease in it. He could never get the crease out. But he said it didn't really affect the function or use of it. So... it doesn't seem to be a huge problem. If you look on that site also, like I was talking to you, you can buy the replacement body section for $35, I think, for the 12-inch and about $50 for the 18-inch. So I don't think it's a horrible option. It is still a lot of money. It's very lightweight, fairly expensive, and not super durable. But that's always the trade-off with all our gear. Generally, the lighter weight we get, the less durable, the less robust they're going to be. Same thing with the tent. If you're going with these sil nylon style tents, they're going to be lighter, thinner than your canvas one. They may not retain the heat as well. They probably about as functional for like water resistance and stuff either way. But that's the trade-off you're paying for. You want that extra weight that's going to allow you to go places you wouldn't go with that big heavy tent. If I decided to take my little tent there and go for a walk in the woods, I can take the snowshoes, throw that in a pack, and go. It takes up less room than my hammock. The stove is going to add a bit to it. I can throw down on a little sled. I can throw some of my gear on there, and I can go places that I don't think you'd even dream of trying to drag that canvas one.
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be too much to go places that I wouldn't. It would have to be at the end of a four-wheeler trail for me to go with the canvas one. Yeah. I would not want to carry that thing more than 10, 15 feet in the woods, honestly, because after that, you're going to be hooked into everything, because it was a big bag, and it was heavy and awkward, so.
The only thing I kind of want to say, because I think we're both primarily hammock campers now, like that seems to be our preference. In one way, my tent weighs less than my hammock setup. My tent setup, like when I pack the bag, and it actually weighs less and it takes up less room in my bag because I don't need the underquilt and a sleeping bag. And those are my bulky, heavy items really now. The stove throws it out the other side, but if I was just going camping at the same time, carrying similar gear, I can go for lighter in my tent setup right now than I can in my hammock setup. That being said, my tent setup requires basically a 10-foot radius flat area to set up it.
Hammock requires 2 trees, roughly 15 feet away.
I usually say between 12 and 24 feet. I can set my hammock up. That makes it much more versatile system. When we went for that trip, we actually checked out 2 or 3 locations before we found one that we were satisfied we could set up all tents to. And even a slight lean to the land often means that you have like a bigger breathing area on one side or a slightly downset on the other area. And that's these teepee style ones. They're actually somewhat forgiving in this way. I have a tarp style tent that has these 2 doors. You have the same one, I believe.
I don't have it behind me. I packed it up in the closet, but it's the One Tiger's Anchorage.
Yeah, and they got a couple of new ones coming out that are somewhat similar. But the thing I love about it is it is really small, lightweight, packs well. It does give you a decent amount of room. It is darn near impossible to set up well. If you don't have a good, flat, even area to set it up and get everything pegged down, you're going to have one side that's kind of floppy, or it's going to be floating high off the ground.
Yeah, and I think Jeremy said the exact same thing in his review of it as well.
Yeah. And it's really nice when they set up and they look good. But if it's... And that's a big thing, I guess, looking good. It's not as much to me, but functionally, it makes a huge difference. When I use that same tent, the last Jeremy, and the doors were very floppy. In the wind, they move around a lot, and that gets annoying, and it creates some problems. I was able to deal with it by actually pulling some of the slack inside the tent. But still, it's something I'd rather not have to deal with, not be fighting with. I never had any of those problems with my hammock. So you do have some things going on here. There's also no floors to these tents. The canvas ones or the the nylon ones. So you're open to whatever's on the ground and in the ground. If you have wet, damp ground, you're going to have a wet, damp floor, um, which is something to be, somewhat aware of. I've dealt with it by using a cheap waterproof style tarp to put underneath my whole sleep system, and it's usually a bit big enough that I got a little area that I can kind of sit, kneel. The canvas one you said had like an 8-foot ceiling.
Yeah, it was really high, and like I said, square sides and whatnot. But same thing, no floor.
No.
We had the cots, so it really wasn't that big of an issue. We brought a dollar store tarp
Yeah.
equivalent and threw it on the floor, and that's basically just a spot between the. We put the cots down the sides and threw that in the side, so you just had a place where you could pop your boots off and kind of lay in bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you have a bit of comfort there, though, because you could stand up in that tent. You could probably sit fairly comfortably on your little cots. With these TP Wallet style ones, if you had a cot, you're going to have to be closer to the center, which means you're closer to the stove. And you only have 4 foot and a bit clearance. So I think 4'8" is the peak of the tent. It means that, and that's where the pole is, that everywhere else you have significantly less. So you're really kind of forced to more or less sit on the floor, on your sleeping bag mattress. And that's what I've done in a couple of trips I've done in these style tents. And it's not uncomfortable. But if you do have really poor ground, that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, even in the canvas ones at the lowest sides, I don't think my head touched. So they had to at least be 6 feet even on the lowest sides.
So, something to think about. But I do love, it's small, compact, the ability to get that little bit of heat. You get that stove going in there. You can boil a little bit of water, have your cup of tea or your coffee. You can cook up your little bit of food. And it's a bit of warmth. Getting changed, like you've hammock camped in the winter.
Unfortunately, yes. You're going to talk about the old changing shuffle, aren't you?
Well, this is a real thing. Like you have to you really should change your clothes before you pull into your sleeping bag. And I recommend in the winter probably like a good set of thermals at least, or something that's fairly warm. Maybe if you get some kind of like wool base layer or something that's going to retain some heat to sort of add to your sleeping system. That switch of getting out of your what's presently warm clothing onto you and essentially getting all but naked and then putting on this other clothes that, let's be honest, almost no matter what you do is going to be significantly colder than you are.
It's not the most comfortable thing, and it's always awkward to do.
Yeah.
Not so much the getting undressed, but it's just how do you coordinate yourself that much, especially when there's snow on the ground?
Yeah. Again, if you have a mat or something you can throw down underneath your hammock, something lightweight. Some people use like a little Tyvek sheet, 2-3 feet square, whatever. That kind of helps. You can put some of your clothes on top of your hammock. You get in, you sort of strip it down in under your tarp, and you get it on. One trick I've used, and I think I talk about this a fair bit. I'm a bit of a fan of these hand warmers. I haven't been up until the last few years, but I throw a hand warmer into my sleeping bag before I go in winter camping. Before you get into bed, just have it in there. It kind of warms up your sleeping bag. Take your night clothes and throw in with it. And leave it there. Like, go in, open up that thing, half hour, 45 minutes before your time to go to bed. Throw that in your clothes in there, and then at least it'll be not cold. I'm just going to say it's going to be warm and toasty, but it's going to be not cold. And that's going to make a bit of a difference, because putting that cold clothing on is initially a bit of a shock to the system. So that's my little helpful hint from Ben. Weighs a few grams and can make you more comfortable. But with the hot tent, you don't need to worry about any of this. Before you go to bed, you're going to go in, you're going to light the stove, you're going to get that going. You probably got a fire going outside. You're going to be talking with your buddies. You're going to be cooking or whatever. You don't want to do all that in your. Um, but when it's coming close to time to bed, you go get your stove lit. You get everything warm. You go in. It's fairly warm in here. You can easily get changed. You can easily get ready. You can sit there and kind of be comfortable. Do your thing. Read if you got a little bit of a light, and it's a comfort that you don't really get in your hammock. The hammock is kind of a place for sleep, and then you get up and you have to, you can lounge there a bit, but you can't really sit and be overly comfortable for any length of time, or at least I can't.
No, I agree with you. And Jeremy's good for it. He sits in his hammock a lot and does his videos and stuff like that. I can't pull that off. I just can't. I don't find them that overly comfortable to sit in, to be honest with you.
After a point in time, I find that the outer edge kind of digs into your legs. You can kind of, if you pull your legs up and go cross style, I guess you're kind of comfortable.
Oh, that's just a recipe for a faceplant for me. But
sure, stubby guys are really balanced.
yeah, no, we're round. Balls roll everywhere, right? So we roll out of stuff as well. But we are up on 46 minutes, and one last thing I want to bring up on the hot tent thing, just for people to be aware, is you heard us talk about it a little bit earlier on in the show, but you still need a really good sleep system to go hot tenting. Don't think that just because you got a stove that you can skimp on a good sleep system. It's not going to be... It makes you comfortable, but as that stove dies down, like Ben was saying, the temperature's going to drop to the exact same as what it is outside. Maybe a few degrees north of that, but not by much. Like if it's minus 20 outside, don't expect it to stay 20 degrees inside the tent as it starts dying down. It's going to very rapidly drop in temperature, and you're going to have to rely on your base layers and your sleep system to keep you from legitimately freezing. Otherwise, you're going to have a real long night of basically just laying in your sleeping system all night, feeding the stove to try and stay warm.
And you can go through a significant amount of wood. I cut up 3 or 4 arm loads, and I mean good size arm loads of what I would have referred to growing up as kindling to run these little stoves. Because these stoves don't take logs. They take, like 1 inch diameter square ends and probably like not even like 8-9 inches long pieces of wood. So it's small wood, but I took quite a few arm loads in and burned through it all the first night because I kept the fire going all night, which meant I was up fairly frequently. I didn't get great sleep doing this. With the hammock, once I get to sleep, I'm usually pretty solidly asleep till I wake up, early in the morning. I get a long night's sleep. So it changes the type of trip. The last time I used it, I did exactly what you sort of described. It wasn't as cold. I lit the stove to keep the chill out of it, and then I went to sleep. In fact, I was experimenting with spark arresters, and my spark arrestor actually kind of gummed up, and so it wasn't breathing well, so it was kind of fine that I let it out. And I slept. But I had a good sleep system, rated well for the weather. In fact, I was probably a little warm for what I had. But that's exactly it. You do want to be prepared, because otherwise you are going to have to be up there running that stove constant, and you're going to go through a fair bit of wood. And once you run out,
you're out.
Night, you don't want to run out in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night trying to cut more wood and split and process it. There's a fair bit of work involved in that. Probably don't need a lot of trees, but you're going to process that tree a lot to make it burnable. Right. That definitely has an effect. Okay.
Yeah, so that was just the one point I kind of wanted to get across there, just because initially, way back when I first looked at hot tent and stuff like that, my first initial thought was, oh, great, I can get a hot tent, and now I don't need that, minus 18 sleeping bag. And then I got thinking about it, I'm like, no, that's not right. So if anybody else out there had that thought, because it is kind of the initiative thought, you got heat in the tent, why would you need more? It's only good for as long as the fire's going, and the stoves are inherently smaller than what you would have in your house. So just take all that into account before you go out in the snow. And as we always say, just be safe. Maybe test it at home first so you know what your times are going to be. And if something does go wrong, you burn through your wood or whatever the case may be, at least you got somewhere to retreat and stay warm for the night.
The other thing that I don't think you can say too much, you have a hot stove in a very small, tight quarters. And the smaller tents, it's probably even worse so. Yes, it's great. You got the stove there. It's producing heat. You can do some cooking. You can do a lot of things. It's very comfortable. You're trying to maneuver around this stove. You have to be uber careful. The trip I did, one of us, I think all of us to some degree burned. My daughter grabbed the hot exhaust. She gave herself a slight burn on her hand, made it very uncomfortable. I had no fingerprints for 2 or 3 days just from opening and closing the door, and I think the other guys had similar complaints of small burns on hands. Nothing serious or extremely painful, but
Still something to be aware of.
it's something to kind of keep in thought. You're in there. We tried drying my daughter's hat on a wood pile next to the stove in the middle of the night. I sort of noticed it was a little bit hazy, and I smelled something kind of burning, and I said, oh no, and I reached over, and her hat was literally crispy. Ruined it. It totally did. It was sharp and jagged, actually. It had melted. There was plastic in the hat, and it literally turned to sharp, jagged edges. So, yeah, you definitely have to be careful of this added thing, especially around, say, $200 sleeping bags. You don't want to accidentally go over there. The last trip, my down jacket touched the edge of the stove at one point and did serious damage to that. So do be careful. Make sure the thing is very cold when you take it all apart. You're trying not to damage your stove, but you're also not trying to damage yourself and your other equipment and your tent itself. If you're not careful, you could either burn yourself or the tent just taking it apart. So you kind of want to be out when you're pulling it all apart, which adds to your takedown time, or it means you can't be running it in the morning when you're getting ready to take down. Yeah, I think that covers most of what we're going to talk about. I think there's still some hope that me and you are going to get a hot tent trip maybe this year. If fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. If it all pans out, like I said, fingers crossed.
We still got 3 months really to potentially get this in. January, February, and March are all decent months for said type trips. By April, I'm not sure you'd need one, but we could still even do something in April. Come May, I usually don't need, I turn the heat off in this house, I go to the cabin, we don't have much heat, so...
Yeah, you're back to mostly just underquilting. Better. You don't really need a stove kind of deal. But, yep, definitely things coming in the summer. As always, those of you listening and those of you watching, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, of course. Those of you that are listening only, you can find all our podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and pretty much any other podcasting service out there now. I've realized that we have ended up on tons of them that we never actually submitted to, but we ended up there, which is great. And if you are just kind of a regular listener and you've never watched one of the shows live, be sure to jump on YouTube. Just search us, Atlantic Bushcraft, on YouTube. It'll come up to us. Be sure to subscribe. We have a giveaway coming up in the next few weeks, and you have to be subscribed to be able to be a part of that. And just check it out. We love the interaction. We have some regulars that usually come on. Tonight we have Emily with us. We usually have Chris, Gary, and a few other Jeremy, and a few other people, and it's a real good time. So if you're ever wondering what it'd be like to chat with us, that's the easiest way. 8:30 Atlantic time, Canada, is when we put them out on Wednesdays. Hop on, give us a shout, and have a little chat with us. Anything else, Ben?
No, I think you covered it. Like we always say, get out there, enjoy yourself, have fun, and tell us about it. We're very interested in hearing how you do.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Night.